On this week's Glanbia Ireland Dairy Focus Vodcast, we'll go through the actual cost of not hitting targets in regards to autumn grassland management, and we'll also hear about the importance of a correct dry cow mineral programme this winter. Firstly, we'll hear from Martin Ryan on the importance of a high quality and planned dry cow mineral programme this winter.
We're approaching the latter end of lactation. The most important thing, I suppose, going forward from here is to look at some of the issues that will make sure successful calving season, and they start right here from today. So the first thing, I suppose, is to make sure cows are in correct body condition going forward, and the recommendation is absolutely to try and dry those cows off at a condition score that we'd like to calve them down. Besides that, then the big issue is to have a very good dry cow mineral programme. And really the first thing is, I suppose, all minerals consist of macro elements and micro elements. And in the macros, they have a big influence on the metabolic issues that we'll be confronted with in the spring. And they're mainly calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, sodium and potassium. And they all interact with each other. And the whole purpose of the dry cow mineral programme is to manage those in a way that we have a trouble-free calving season next spring. And in particular, milk fever is really the big challenge here, and that's the one we really have to control. In order to do that, I suppose the primary element is magnesium. In the formulations that we use, we include up to 30 grams per head per day at the recommended feeding rate of magnesium, which counteracts calcium, the whole purpose of which is to make the cow's system far more efficient at using calcium when it comes to calving time. As soon as calving occurs, there's a huge demand on the cow's body for calcium. Every litre of milk requires 2 extra grams of calcium per day, and milk fever, however, is just the start of problems. Once you have milk fever, you will automatically increase the incidence substantially of many other metabolic problems. Anytime you have a cow with milk fever, you can take it that there'll be probably 6 other cows with a subclinical level of milk fever as well that will go unnoticed. So it has been well proven and scientifically shown that low calcium in cows will actually increase distochia by about 2.5, will increase retained placentas by about 3 times, and increase the incidence of LDAs by close to 5 times. And the other, I suppose, half of the issue then is the micro elements. And all surveys of Ireland have shown from forage that particularly the 5 key trace elements that are involved in the immune system, they being selenium, copper, zinc, cobalt, manganese, are all deficient in Irish farms, and generally Irish forages supply less than 20% of cow requirement in that regard. Know what you're feeding, measure out and weigh initially what you're doing. Keep the system very simple. Our best recommendation is top dressing the silage. That's the best way of making sure that most cows get it. If you're short of barrier space, I would say the best recommendation is to do it twice per day. Few little things I suppose to consider. If you have exceptionally high potassium on the farm, it's important to maybe increase the mineral feeding level, or alternatively replace a small amount of the silage with maybe maize silage or whole crop silage if there are options on the farm.
In regards to autumn grassland management, when we look at Pasture Base Ireland figures from this week, many farms are behind target in regards to achieving peak average farm cover and building covers this back end, which can have detrimental effects on the length of your grazing season this year, but also have a detrimental effect on having sufficient grass and an amount of grass available to achieve early turnout next spring. 2 key figures to always have in the back of your mind at this point when we're making decisions about autumn grassland management. And when we talk about building covers in order to extend out and have a bank of grass to extend out the grazing season this back end, but also not compromising ourselves and having enough grass to achieve early turnout next spring, is the 2 figures that we often hear about that came from Teagasc research, and those figures that every additional day at grass that we achieve this back end is worth €1.80 per cow or per livestock unit per day, but also that every additional day that we achieve at grass next spring is worth €2.70 per livestock unit or per cow per day. Currently, we've seen on Pasture Base Ireland national growth figures starting to decline, although good weather is forecast for the week ahead and high grass growth rates should be achieved. naturally we will start to see those growth rates decline, and it's about optimising and trying to build as much cover as possible while we still have good grass growth in order to set ourselves up for a successful back end and spring 2021. In many cases we'll see national demand matching average growth quite shortly. So now it's about reacting quickly where you are behind target, and targets will be dependent on stocking rate, which you'll see on screen currently. But it's about reacting quickly and making changes to decrease that demand in order to allow the platform to build cover. How do we reduce demand? We reduce demand by either bringing back in extra area, we remove surplus stock such as young stock or culls or empties off the platform if possible, or we look at reducing grass demand by increasing supplementation, be it parlour feed, or where we are well below target, it might include putting in a silage buffer. At the moment, for mid-September, we should be at a rotation length of 30 to 35 days, with that extending out to 40 days for the 1st of October. And we're seeing a national average dry matter sitting at around between 15 and 16% currently during dry weather conditions. Again, figures can be quite farm specific and they're always dependent on the stocking rate being played out on the platform, but also in the case of heavy farms or where ground conditions may deteriorate quickly, we want to alter those targets. If you're on a heavy farm scenario, we don't want to build average farm cover greater than 900 kilos of dry matter per hectare as an average, to avoid going into those heavier covers of greater than 2,000. When we talk about not setting ourselves up this back end and being behind target, what the actual cost of that is. Yes, this back end we'll have additional feed costs and we'll also probably end up housing early. But if we don't set ourselves up this back end, we'll also have detrimental effects on what our opening farm cover is next spring, where we have a high demand for high quality grass for the freshly calved herd. If we look at some research data and we look at a farm that is on target for an opening average farm cover of 950 kilos of dry matter per hectare for February 1st, and we compare that to a farm scenario where they haven't set themselves up and they have an opening farm cover of 650 kilos of dry matter per hectare on February 1st. The farm that hasn't set themselves up sufficiently is going to incur additional costs. Those costs being from research, an additional 70 kilos of concentrate required, an additional 180 kilos of silage feed required, which if we put an approximate cost of €45 a cow for that period in order to catch up on average farm cover, in our typical 100 cow herd, that would have an additional feed cost of €4,500 compared to the farms that are on target and set themselves up well this back end. For more information on any topics covered in this week's Glanbia Ireland Dairy Focus Vodcast, contact your local Glanbia Ireland business manager, call into your local Glanbia Ireland branch, or log on to glanbiaconnect.com.